All right. So we're live with Alfredo Deza, who is an evangelist from Microsoft and also professor, adjunct professor at Duke, who is teaching not only boot camps for Python, but also is going to be co-instructing the MLOps course next summer for the AI product innovation program. So, and in addition to that, if for people that aren't aware of Alfredo's background, in an earlier life, he's reincarnated as a software person, but he used to be an Olympic athlete. So he's had a very interesting life, and we've also written some books together. So what we're going to cover today is we're going to get into, I think, one of the most interesting topics that's happening right now in software, which is cloud-based deployment or cloud-based development systems. And I've done quite a bit with GitHub CodeSpaces, but there's another level. Like I'm probably at like level 6, and Alfredo is going to get us to maybe like level 10 today. Would that be a good summary?
Yeah, that sounds great. No, thank you so much for having me here. And yes, so the idea is to see what CodeSpaces is about. Try it out, kick it off, and see how we can make it work for a project that has nothing to do with anything, that has no setup, nothing going on. It's a plain project, vanilla Python project, and then we'll see why and when CodeSpaces can be really, really helpful. With that said, I think we can get
Yeah,
started. I'm going to share my screen.
sure. Yeah, let's do that. Let's go to screen share.
Yeah, there we go. So great. So and what I'm going to be doing today is also not just be doing things, but also asking questions so that we can take a look at some of what are some of these things actually doing. So I have a Python project here, and this Python project, well, it's using a couple of things. This is actually going to be part. It's a project that is a demo for part of the Coursera MLOps course that Noah and I are working on. And this is a summarization project using Hugging Face. So typical Python project, it has a setup.py. Python has 20 different ways of setting up a project, installing dependencies. Setup.py is one of them. Let's take a quick look at what that is. Nothing really out of the ordinary. We have a very simple setup script. It's going to create a console script right here. It's called Summarize. It's going to create a command line tool. The requirements for this project are going to come from the requirements.txt file. And then what those requirements are, and I think I'm missing one, but we'll figure out what that is. Requirements.txt is here, so you can see I have transformers. Transformers, if you're not familiar with Hugging Face, that is coming from Hugging Face. It's the library from Hugging Face that allows you to interact with many of its models. We're going to use click for the command line tool, and we are going to be using TensorFlow for doing the machine learning bits and pieces interacting with the model. So that's essentially what it is. Nothing really, out of the ordinary here. It's just plain. If you think about this as a plain Python project that has nothing to do with anything specific, the same things that we're going to do today with CodeSpaces specifically are going to apply. All right, so having gone through the overview, let's do a little bit of CodeSpaces. So CodeSpaces, if you have that enabled, if you have access to that, you'll have this very familiar green button here, the code button, and you'll have this CodeSpaces tab. Now, usually what you'll have is the local one, and this will be even more familiar if you've done a lot of work with GitHub. So you have HTTPS, SSH, GitHub CLI, and all of these options. But for CodeSpaces, you'll have this extra tab here, and you'll be able to click on that.
Do you want to just maybe just say real quick the difference between those three options?
Yes. Right. So we have several different options here. When you're interacting with a remote GitHub repository, you'll have, say, for example, HTTPS. So HTTPS would allow you to clone the repository. So you can see here that's the whole URL, and then you will go to your terminal, and then you'll be able to use this HTTP address to clone that locally. However, because it's HTTPS, whenever you want to make changes and push those changes back to the remote GitHub repository, it will prompt you for your username and password. Now, with SSH, if you have your keys, your SSH keys set up, then GitHub allows you to clone that repository, and you can see that the URL, the URI actually changes a little bit, and then the authentication is protected with your SSH key, so you're not prompted for your username and password every single time. And then finally, the GitHub CLI, which I've usually don't use it, so can't tell you much about it. But if you use that, then you have the ability to go and clone that repo. So those are the three options. I usually pick the SSH one for repositories that are mine. That's if I have access, or otherwise it will be HTTPS if I don't have access to push changes back to the repository. All right, so CodeSpaces, if I click here, you'll have the ability to create a CodeSpaces. You have also the ability to change on what branch, but for simplicity for today, we're going to just use CodeSpace on the main branch, and it's going to create one. All right, so I'm going to click there. It's going to go through the process of setting this up. And what's going on here is that behind the scenes, GitHub is saying, I'm going to create a code space. But what is a code space? It's first of all, it's a remote compute. And it will bring all of your files, as you see right now that everything's loading right now. And it's bringing the files from the repository that I created. So if I go back, so it's grabbing all of these files here in my repository called Hugging Face Summarization, and then it's getting them over here to VS Code. And this is all in the web, by the way. So I haven't left my web browser. You do have the ability of connecting to this code space locally from a VS Code installation. So if you have VS Code locally, you can connect to this GitHub code space remotely. So essentially what it is that it is VS Code. It's a development environment in the cloud backed by a remote compute. So right now, what is happening right here, do you see these extensions icon going kind of like crazy there with the blue icon? Because I have my settings synchronized in VS Code, then it is installing every single extension that I usually have on VS Code. So that is useful because, and I'm going to click here so you can see that. You see that how that there's like a little thing that shows up where the progress was showing up. That is because it's installing all of the extensions that I usually have in VS Code. If you don't have that setting enabled for synchronizing your VS Code installation, then that won't happen. But if you do, then now you know why.
This is like essentially like a cloud-based Visual Studio.
It is a cloud-based Visual Studio Code development environment where this is not local. So if I go here actually and say, let's take a look at what we have here. So we have Debian. Actually, this is Ubuntu 2004. So by default, you have Ubuntu 2004, and that's what we're dealing with here. So very nice. You have, let's see, how much RAM do we have? Seems like we have like about 8 gigs of RAM. So pretty powerful, very good. And so far, nothing out of the ordinary other than, hey, this is nice. This is running on the cloud. And we have our project files, right? So if I click here, if you're familiar with VS Code, this will work exactly like VS Code. I'm going to close my terminal here. These are the exact same things. So you can see here that I'm going to already get in some squiggly lines using open without explicitly specifying and encoding. So some of the linter stuff is working already. We're getting a little bit of problems there that we need to fix. And then that's it. Like we can do all kinds of different things here. We can open up a terminal, back again, and we can say, well, we can create a Python virtual environment. We can say Python M. And a virtual environment is always a good idea because it allows you to it allows you to protect yourself. And you saw there the VS Code say, hey, I noticed that you just created a virtual environment. Do you want me to change the Python interpreter to be on that virtual environment? And I said, yes. So what that allows me to do is to activate, and let's say VM being activate, and then my Python changes to the virtual environment that I just created, and the same, if I need to install some requirements, then everything will just work. So if I say, pip install, I like Flake 8, so let's install it, it will install it for that virtual environment. All right, so again, this is just a regular project, but what else is there? This is great. This is awesome. It's, if I go back here to my regular GitHub repository and I click on CodeSpaces will show. It puts a funny name on it. But if I click on Manage All, you'll see that these CodeSpace, this remote coding environment, is active right now, 4 cores, and I have the options here to manage that code space. I can open it in the browser, which I just did. I was doing it in the browser, but because I have Visual Studio Code, I could click this, and it would actually, because I have Visual Studio Code installed locally, it will prompt my computer to open the application, the Visual Studio Code editor, and then connect to that remote code space. So if you're,
what do you think the use cases for that versus the browser? Because I find like the browser is so good. Like why would you want to connect to your local machine?
well, I would say there's a couple of reasons, but most importantly, I think it is a matter of feeling comfortable with it. Maybe perhaps you feel like more comfortable with your own environment. Sometimes the browser with certain keyboard shortcuts there might be some slight differences. When you're trying to do a lot of shortcuts, you might get into trouble if you're trying to do shortcuts that are have a collision with the browser itself.
Yeah, and I guess now that I'm thinking out loud here, I think what may be a use case, even though I mostly use the browser now, I almost don't use my desktop that often. That one scenario would be if you create a code space for every project that you work on, for the most part, like 10 of them or something like that. And then you also have some projects that don't have code spaces because let's say you're using GPUs or you're doing Mac OS development, like you're building like UI tools for iOS apps or something. And so you have no choice but to use your local environment, where, something like that. I could see how you could stay in Visual Studio Code, and then some projects are on your desktop and then some projects are in the code spaces. Like, does that make sense as a workflow?
Yeah, that does make sense. Now, whenever you're connected to a remote compute in CodeSpaces, in this case, you're not making use of your local GPU or CPU or RAM at all. So
Yeah,
everything's happening remotely.
so that could be kind of cool actually, because if you wanted to create a distributed computer, let's say that you're, I don't know, like working on multiple projects at the same time, and you're compiling C++ code and all kinds of like stuff locally because
Right.
you have like a monster machine that's like, people, there are some people that have like 100 core machines and you're doing all that stuff. And then your machine is completely saturated, but you could also have another code space that
Yeah.
that actually could also compile code, and that could just basically make you able to have more compute just inside of your own local Visual Studio.
Yeah, so you could actually select something different here. So I'm going to click on configure and create, and I can select other types of machines. Well, in this case, my account is just restricted to 8 gigs of RAM, 4 core, and 32 gigs of storage. But you do have, the capacity to ask the GitHub team for up to 32 cores and or GPU machines. So you do have, and even you have like some regions as well. Here you have like 4 different types of regions to help with the latency.
Well, that's actually a pretty interesting use case. I didn't even think about that. But let's say that you're from, I don't know, Southeast Asia or something like
Yeah,
that,
yeah,
and you have a company you're working for that you do a lot of API calls to, resources there. You could then basically take a plane ride to the United States, maybe go to the Bay Area, and then you could actually toggle your
that's
Southeast
right.
Asia instance, and then the latency between the project you're working on would be very low versus
Will be very
even
low.
if you're
Right.
at like Google headquarters or something like where there's going to be latency because of the fact that you're actually in a different region. So that's a advantage, I think, of CodeSpaces that many people don't talk about.
Yeah, that's right. Um, so the other thing that I want to do here, I'm going to go back to CodeSpaces again. This is just like VS Code. I'm going to do a few of the things that I would do for a Python project. I'm going to see what are some of the steps that I would take in a Python project that I just cloned. I just created a virtual environment. That's one. I just installed one dependency. The next thing that I would do is I would like to install the project. Like if you see here on the setup.py here, it's going to create this console script. The console script means that it's going to create an executable and make it available on my path so I can interact with it. This is a command line tool after all, and I want to interact with it. So as a software engineer, I would say, okay, so this is pretty cool. I want to install this tool and make it available. So the way I would do that is with Python setup.py, and then I would do develop. Right? I'm going to clear that and run Python setup.py develop. And what is going on there? Oh, look at that. So it's having some problems with TensorFlow. All right. So what it's, if I do, I think that allow me to install the Python packaging is kind of tricky. So you can see here that some things succeeded and were correct, and some others had trouble. But we'll figure out what those are and how to get around them. So here, the tool is called Summarize. So if I say summarize -- help, you will see that it allowed me to execute the script, but I got a lot of problems here. And that is because Python behind the scenes wasn't able to install all of the requirements. And that is because if I scroll all the way up, when it was trying to install TensorFlow, it couldn't. And one of the problems here is that, and now we're getting into the software engineering, to the development kind of like a workflow that someone might come in as an engineer and say, well, what's going on here? You have to figure out these problems that are going to come up. So here, I've already done the hard work for you. The thing is that if we say Python -- version, you will see that my Python version is 3.10. The thing is that TensorFlow does not work with Python 3.10. So if we actually go to the Python package index, which is pypi.org, I think. Yeah, there we go. And we search for TensorFlow. Let's check TensorFlow 2.9.1, and we'll see. It's actually weird that it says 3.10, but I'm pretty sure that there's some packages or some dependencies there that are not going to work. So what we need to do there is it's really odd that they put 3.10 there, because it does not work with 3.10. So what we need to do is actually go and select a different Python version. I don't know if this CodeSpace. So now we're seeing like, okay, so if I have a problem where 3.10 does not work, what would I do? How would I solve that? So let's check if this machine has Python 3.8, say, for example. So Python 3.8 is available. So let's create a different Python virtual environment, and let's see if that solves our problem. So I'm going to say VM 3.8. That's going to be Python-m VM 3.8, and then it's prompting me to install dependencies on the server itself. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and let's do that manually. Sudo apt install Python 3.8 -VM, and that's going to install the packages. It's going to probably prompt me if I want to go ahead. Now let's run the command again. That should succeed. Then we're going to activate it. We're going to try to install Python TensorFlow again and see what happens. Have you ever gotten into trouble like that, Noah, installing dependencies with Python?
Yeah, I mean, do you typically deactivate first or no?
Yeah, that's a good point. You can, but I think that it still works if you, like why not? So actually source VM 3.8 being activate.
What is nice though is you're showing the use case for virtual environments
Yes,
because
that's right.
Easily test a totally different style.
So what do you know? TensorFlow is now installing.
Yeah.
So this is the problem right now. You know, like we're getting into what would happen if I don't have Python. Like if I was running this locally, and this is one of the highlights here. What if I was running TensorFlow or this project locally, and hey, I don't have Python 3.8 installed in my machine? What would I do then? What if like I'm collaborating with you, Noah, and you say, well, Alfredo, like I have 3.9, it's Python after all. Like what's the difference? Yeah. Well, the difference is some libraries might not install, right?
Yeah, I think the local installation for machine learning libraries especially is so bad. I mean, it's so bad. And this is one of the reasons why people, I think, should use the cloud-based environments like GitHub CodeSpaces, if possible.
Yeah. It gives you like a normalized everyone has the same Python version, the same setup. So now I've managed to install my tool, summarize, so I can do help, and hopefully that should work. It is complaining about some problems there, and like I mentioned in the beginning, I forgot to install Beautiful Soup 4 or declare it as a dependency. So why don't we go ahead and let's fix that. So I'm going to close these. Open requirements. You can see that all of my dependencies are pinned, and that's a good way to kind of like safeguard yourself, like protect yourself from newer versions breaking your environment. So anyone that grabs this project and tries to install it will have the same versions, the same libraries for the same Python version. Now, one thing that I like to do here is, and I'm gonna open up my terminal again, is you can see that there it activated the other Python version. So let's check if there we go. So if I go, I'm gonna clear these so that it's more straightforward. Like everybody can see what I'm doing here. What I'm going to do is I'm gonna do pip. I'm gonna make sure that pip is coming from the Python 3.8 virtual environment, and I'm gonna do pip install PS4. Now I'm not pinning the version. I know that I want to get the latest one in this case, so I'm going to do pip install BS4, which is Beautiful Soup. It's a library that allows me to parse some HTML, and I'll tell you why that's useful in a second. But now that this is installed, I want to capture the version that I have installed because I know it works and put it in the requirements text. So there's a couple of things that you can do here. You can see that I installed version 4.11.1. So you could copy paste that in there, or you could use the shell. So what I do is pip freeze, and then I find BS4. Whoa, BS4. I think it is. Beautiful Soup has this thing where it names its libraries differently. So there you go. Beautiful Soup 4.11.1. So now what you can do is append it to requirements text. You can see now it appears up here. So that's a good workflow. Like you install your libraries, you want to capture what versions you're adding there, and there you go. So now I know that this is going to work. I can now if I do summarize, I can do Python setup.py develop again to reinstall the dependencies that I messed up, and then I can say summarize help. And that, in theory, should work. Okay, so there we go. So now it works. Now we're in a good spot.
Yeah, and this is a good example of the weird things that happen with deep learning. It's like, why did you give me this error message? Like, you don't have a GPU. It's like, thanks. I knew that. Like, yeah. You just ruined my tool.
Yeah, so now you're gonna have all of these weird output there. All right. So now we fixed it, but now we have changes in our code space that it does not live in our repository, right? We have added Beautiful Soup 4 version 4.11.1. If you go back to the repository, we look at requirements, it's not there. So how do we do that? Well, I'm already authenticated here. GitHub already knows who I am. I don't need to sign in anywhere. I can close here, go to my, go here to version control. Unfortunately, it believes that all of these things are part of my the file project. Yes, but that's not the case. We need to look for requirements. So let's take there we go. This one. There we go. And I'm going to commit that. I'm going to say update requirements, and then I commit. And then I'm going.
Yeah, I never used this. I didn't realize that the GUI tool is not that bad.
Yeah, so you can say push. I don't want to git fetch periodically. And so if I go back to my GitHub repository and I reload that, you'll see the Beautiful Soup is there with my commit that I just did 20 seconds ago. So that's good. You can definitely do that with CodeSpaces. Now, we have several problems that we need to fix, right? And the expectation cannot be for me as a software engineer that I'm collaborating with you, Noah, and tell you, hey, Noah, like just click on the CodeSpace. And by the way, there's like a list of this. You have to do this 20-step thing to get you to where you need to be. So how do we get there? How can we make use of CodeSpaces? And these, what I'm going to show you, this is the thing that makes CodeSpaces amazing and super useful and allows you to solve all of the problems that I just showcased right now. What we're going to do is create everything that we had, the Ubuntu server that we were using right here on the CodeSpace. Everything that we were using here is the default. That's the basic default vanilla CodeSpace that everyone gets when they click on CodeSpaces. What we're going to add is some configuration files that are going to allow us to specifically define what is it that we want. And VS Code itself allows you to do this very easily. So we're gonna do dev containers container, and yeah, so CodeSpaces add development container configuration files. So this is a project that doesn't have any configuration files for CodeSpaces, and we're going to add one, right? So you're going to click here.
So it's kind of like a GitHub Actions YAML file, similar
Yes,
concept.
yes,
Okay.
exactly. So once you add these, CodeSpaces will automatically be like, whoa, so you have something pre-configured. I'm going to use that instead of giving you the vanilla Ubuntu CodeSpace that I always give to anything that doesn't have anything pre-configured. So this will take you in a step-by-step, and of course, you can configure everything before committing and pushing. So I'm going to click here, and it's going to tell you, hey, what is it that you want to add? And you can see here that there's several different flavors of the stuff that you want to add. So a simple Ubuntu container with Git, Debian, Alpine, Conda, Python 3, and PostgreSQL, some of the very common scenarios. Well, in this case, I want to select Python 3. So I'm going to do Python 3, and then it's going to say, hey, what version do you want? Now, remember,
it's probably like looking maybe at like a container registry. Actually, that's a good question. Do you know like where it's pulling these artifacts?
yes, and I'll show you once
Okay.
it finishes selecting all of the things you want. It will actually tell you where that container is coming from. You can customize this in whatever way. Like this is just like a useful, kind of like a step-by-step question answer type of a workflow where like it will give you something nice, but you can do whatever container you want. You have like some specialized container that does machine learning, you can use that as well.
And what is kind of interesting that I'm also seeing here is I wasn't aware that there was a bullseye variant, is that I guess you could have a couple flavors of CodeSpace, like
You could.
yeah, and you could have a bullseye which would match maybe like the bullseye that's on your Mac M1, and so you could actually have like maybe like a test of your project that would test that it would still work if you cloned it locally.
Well, the bullseye is and you'll see this in a second. It's the Debian version, because these are Debian versions. So it's Python 3.10 and Debian. It's not. It might be like a little bit confusing because it doesn't tell you what it is. It just tells you bullseye. And it's like unless you know Debian.
Okay.
But remember that problem where I was talking about TensorFlow and how it was tricky and it was not installing because 3.10 is not supported?
Yeah.
So here we can say, oh, you know what? I want actually 3.8 because I don't want Noah to have this problem when he clicks on CodeSpaces. I want him to have this to work right off the bat. So I'm going to click 3.8. I don't want to work with Node. Sometimes you're creating a web application, so I don't want anything with Node. And then you can have additional features. Do you want to have like the AWS CLI? Yes, I want that. Or do you want the Azure CLI? Yeah, sure. And you just click these checkboxes, and then you go. Homebrew, the GitHub CLI, the fish shell, Docker support, Rust, SSH. I mean, this is really, like I want to have a Jupyter lab running there. It's just checkboxes. I don't need anything in particular for this project, so I'm going to just select OK. I don't need anything else here. And let's see what this does. Immediately, right here, it says, okay, we noticed that there's a change to the dev container configuration. Rebuild a container to apply them now. I'm not going to do it right now because I want to show you what the configuration looks like before we apply those changes to this code space. So I'm going to click.
Nice. I like this, how it generates it for you, which is
So you don't need to actually remember how to do this or how to write this ginormous file. In here, let's just start first with the Docker file. So there's two components here. First is the Docker file, and the other one is the configuration, the dev container.json file. So let's start with the dev container one, and we're gonna close this up. So no, where's my container? This one. All right. So remember, you were asking where's this container coming? So by default, it gives you the ability to select all of these versions. The bullseye comes. It's like it's a thing that tells the system what version of Debian that you want to use. So there's bullseye, there's Debian Buster. So Debian Buster and bullseye are the ones that are working, and these in particular, this container is coming from Microsoft. So you get this dev container with Python from Microsoft. But
and I'm assuming you could probably go to mcr.microsoft.com and browse and look at them as well from a web browser.
That's a good question. I actually haven't tried. Yeah, it's probably like a container registry, and there's some sort of like there we go, it's an artifact registry actually. So there's probably some sort of authentication that needs to happen.
Okay.
But you get all the options here. Now, do you see these variant things? So that's an argument that you can pass into the Docker file, which can be configured in the dev container.json. So you don't actually need to change anything here. You can this is just the default. We're going to change that in the JSON file. We're not doing anything with Node, but we do want to install our dependencies, right? So this is commented out.
Okay. So it's basically like preloading all of the packages for you, right?
Right. That's right.
That's nice.
So I'm going to click this X. So right now, this would copy the requirements.txt into the CodeSpace container, and it's going to install all of my dependencies, TensorFlow included, and beautiful soup with the requirements.txt change that I made. So because it's in requirements.txt, it's going to work. So I'm going to save that, and then I'm going to head over to the configuration file so you can see what that looks like.
So quick question for you. It looks like then that the Docker file can be used by GitHub Actions. Is that correct?
It will be used by GitHub CodeSpaces, not GitHub Actions.
Okay, because that's an interesting. I think that in the future maybe that would be an interesting one, is because the dream scenario would be that the CodeSpace builds with a specific Docker container that you customize, and then when you do GitHub Actions, obviously
you can. By the way, you can. Like you can set up. I think they're called GitHub Action runners, and you can have like your custom runners for GitHub Actions.
Okay.
So instead of getting a vanilla GitHub Action runner, you can say, "Oh, I always have TensorFlow installed. I don't want to install it every single time." Then you have this container-based runner. That's right.
Well, that's nice. So save you a lot of money.
It does. Yeah. Yes, and time waiting for things to install. Like, no, it's not installing anything. It's already installed. Now, remember two things. One is that VS Code asked me, it's like, what Python version do you want? And say 3.8. So now this variant variable is 3.8. So that's going to get passed to the Docker file. So remember in the Docker file, it says 3.10, bullseye, whatever. Like now that's going to get changed because that's just the default. And this is going to configure that
this
Docker
is
file.
the source of truth for CodeSpaces.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. It tells you what Docker file is going to be using. So if your project has already a Docker file, this Docker file would be the top directory would be something like that, /. It isn't. We're going to use just the one that is in the same directory. So I'm going to leave that as is. The context is important because that says the root of where this CodeSpace, where this container is going to get built. In this case, we're going to use 3.8. We're not going to have anything with Node. And here, we're also getting into very, very nice things. We're going to be able to configure the editor itself. So I like Flake8. I don't like any of these things. So I'm gonna remove them. Let's see. I don't want MyPy. I think that's an optimization thing. I don't want PyCode style. I do like PyLint, but for the sake of
simplicity,
so for the sake of making it a little bit easier, I'm gonna say Python linting. I'm gonna say Flake8 enabled equals true.
Oh, I see.
So now I'm enabling Flake8 on the editor. So that means that when I click on, I want to run the CodeSpace that Alfredo created, Flake8 is going to be there. It's going to do the linting for you, and you're going to have
inside
the
of the editor itself. Okay.
That's right. So I'm
Okay.
setting how the editor should be configured for the development environment.
Okay.
If you want something else, some other extension there, you would do that there as well. So speaking about extensions, I'm going to say, yes, I want Python, and I want Pylance, which is like the IntelliSense version of VS Code. So if you wanted something different here, you would definitely do that there. Now, there's another thing there that is that I wanna show you, and that is running a post create command. So do you see here on line 46? There's a post create command. I'm gonna remove this comment, and I'm not gonna install the requirements at text. What I'm going to be doing is Python setup.py develop. So what is that going to do? Remember, I was doing that locally, or not locally, but on the CodeSpace itself as an extra step. Now, when you click run this CodeSpace, it's going to have all the dependencies installed. And once the container is ready with all my files in there for my project, it's going to run develop and summarize. The command line tool is going to be available in the path, and everything's going to be working nicely.
Got it. So you're basically building your own local command line tool before you even start that's got the latest
Yes.
changes.
So when anyone in the world clicks on this project, the setup is going to be the same. Python 3.8 with the requirements installed, and Python setup.py develop. And I'm just giving you an example, but this could be anything, really. You could run PyTest. Like if this has tests and you want PyTest to run every time, sure, why not? We can do that as well.
So this is an interesting workflow for like people that are maybe working on data engineering problems, because if you had 3 people on a team, I could see how you might have a command line tool that does Spark or Pandas or something like this, and then you, even if you don't push it to the Python package index, you just push a custom tool that you created into everybody's path, and it's always the latest changes.
It's always the latest
Which
changes.
I think is a very clever way to work.
So this also opens the possibilities, because especially if you're collaborating with other engineers and you're working with other people, like say, for example, we just found like 2 or 3 problems here, like, one missing dependency. We couldn't install TensorFlow. What was a different Python version? We were creating a virtual environment. I'm not even dealing with a virtual environment here. So what I'm going to be doing here right now is I'm going to go back to my source control. Actually, let's see if I do git ignore, if I add that VM so that it doesn't bother us again. VM, and I think it's VM 3.8. So let's save that. There we go. So that changed the source control. So now it is behaving correctly and not bothering me about my virtual environments. So I'm going to add both the dev container.json and the git ignore and the Docker file as well. And I'm going to say add dev container configuration. The dev container name is basically the configuration for CodeSpaces. So I'm going to commit that. Sync changes. Yes, I want to push them. It's all good. And now let's rebuild our container and see what happens. CodeSpaces, rebuild container right here. Yes, it will. Things will be lost. That's fine. If I haven't committed and push, that would get me into trouble, because those files will be lost. Which puts me into another a good thing about CodeSpaces. You can come back to that CodeSpace and your files will be there. If you haven't destroyed the CodeSpace, like if you forgot to commit or save, everything's still there.
So because one thing I've noticed with CodeSpaces is that if you haven't used it over like maybe a couple weeks, they'll destroy it, right?
Yes.
But
yes.
you're right, if you've checked in this configuration file, then who cares?
Yeah, other cloud providers that have like I think Google Colab, like if you don't save your files, they're gone. Goodbye.
Yeah. I think we're gonna see more companies do this, that yeah, you need to keep, because sometimes you have so much state that is in the configuration of the
Yeah.
operating system and environment that it could take you like hours.
Yeah, that's right. One quick thing that I want to, and I just clicked on to show you the logs for how CodeSpaces. It's installing TensorFlow. It's installing all of the see here on the requirements, that text. It's installing everything that we told it to install. So this is great. It finished in 38 seconds. So now I don't need to install anything. Hopefully, let's cross some fingers, this configuration will work. And all right, so now it's almost there. Now it's connecting to the CodeSpace. It was able to build everything. It's initializing the repository. It will take a second. My extensions will go crazy for a second there. You can see things are starting to show up. GitHub, there's this testing one. Things will start showing up. So, moment of truth. Let's open up a terminal. All right. Let's see if Summarize is there. Oh, Summarize is not there yet. Let's see output.
It might still be working.
It might still be working. That's right. So let's just give it another second. But another thing that we can try is Python version. So that's good. Python 3.8 is working. So what about if we do Python and then we see if our dependencies are installed? We can say import beautiful soup, which is BS4, I think. And BS4 works. So let's say, where is BS4 coming from? And that's coming from the side packages from Python 3.8. So you're effectively not caring about virtual environments or activation, because that is going to work right out of the bat. So let's see if we can open up a new terminal and see if that will work. It's probably still working right now. Let's see what this does.
You can run a htop, right? That's one of the ways I like to see what's going on, is when I'm compiling, because I use the 16 core version a lot, and I'll compile code and everything, is I'll keep two terminals and I'll have one open, and we can see, like, if it's doing it, it looks like it's, I don't know, it looks like maybe
there's a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on here.
So, and again, I'm pretty sure this is going to take a quick second.
You could also say which Summarize, right? To see.
Yeah, and I did, but like it wasn't found. So let's see where I'm at. Well, it doesn't matter. It usually takes a second, but let's do. We can actually say CodeSpaces logs. New creation log. All right. So I'm gonna take a look at the logs somewhere.
I guess if you're doing a lot of work, it may.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
So we can find here Summarize or setup.py.
Looks like it did it. Looks like oh no, error.
This one. Oh, there you go. So can create or remove files in install directory. So, but this is fine though, because we could find a way that we could make this work. And so we had a permission denied, and that's the reason why. And the reason why is because we're installing packages. So this is one of the things where virtual environments would work, but it doesn't matter. It is something that we would be able to work with. But let's still try and go ahead and create new terminal and do Python setup.py develop and see if that works.
Yeah, so so you do want a virtual environment. So probably a virtual environment would be helpful.
Python, yeah. So that's right. So a Python virtual environment would I think would be definitely helpful, and would allow you to um, to get some of these problems resolved for sure. But let's see. Let's see if we can try and work around. Let me perhaps if we do maybe with super user VS Code, Python setup.py, or that's a C, right? Python setup.py develop. Well, yeah. So there's definitely room for improvement there, but you're right. That would that there's definitely things that you can do to make the experience better once you start.
But the concept, I mean, I think makes a lot of sense. The one of the other things I think that's would be interesting that you mentioned was, what about secrets? Like, this is a very big problem for many students.
Right.
How do I could you
So
create
secrets.
like a fake secret or something and just show how you could do that?
Yes. So a secret, and I just, by the way, I just did with sudo. I did
Okay.
summarize, and it worked, of course, because and now I have URL or file. Before I show you secrets, let me show you what would happen, what happens with summarize, because I think it's pretty cool. So let's say, for example, we go
Oh,
to
nice.
docs.microsoft and say, tell me about, open data sets. So I'm going to grab this URL. I'm going to go to the code space and say, hey, summarize -- help. No, not help.
URL.
What is a URL? URL. So it's going to spit up a bunch of warnings. And now behind the scenes, this is the beautiful thing about Hugging Face. I didn't need to include like a ginormous model. So it's pulling it on demand. It's loading that model dynamically.
And the
And
API, I'm assuming it's using your secrets.
right now, this is not using the API for Hugging Face, but because if I show you,
That model doesn't require an API?
does not.
Oh,
So if I go here to main.py, you can see here
whoa, that's really cool.
that this is the whole summarization is right here. That's it.
Whoa. Wow.
There's no API. I mean, perhaps there's something that is required, but okay, so the summarization is complete, and this browser. Well, so there we go. Save time on data discovery and preparation by using curated data that are ready to use in machine learning projects.
Wow.
I think that's a pretty good summarization right there with zero effort. All right, so let's we have a few minutes left, so let's go and take a look at secrets. You mentioned secrets. How do we do secrets? So I'm gonna go here to Hugging Face and the summarization project. So I'm here and you say, well, how do I do secrets? So you go to settings in your project, whatever repo that may be.
Mhm.
But this is a cool thing because you can do secrets per repository for CodeSpaces explicitly. And secrets work in the same way that you would do for GitHub Actions. So here on the left, you'll have the security section, and then you would click here on secrets, and you have three things: one for Actions, one for CodeSpaces, and one from Dependabot. So CodeSpaces is where you want to be. So say, for example, you want to add a new repository secret for CodeSpaces. That means that you're going to create a secret. It's going to be available on your as an environment variable.
There's two kinds of secrets then. There's a CodeSpace secret and there's a resource
Yes.
secret. Wow.
Yes, because you might have secrets that you only want for GitHub Actions, and
Mhm.
that's fine. There's no need for having some secrets in CodeSpaces. So
Where was this? This was in
So if you go to settings
okay.
on your repository and
Yep.
scroll the way down to security,
Uh-huh.
and there's secrets there.
Yep.
So you have
Okay.
Actions and
Actions
CodeSpaces.
CodeSpace.
Yeah.
Wow.
So you click
Really
on
cool.
CodeSpaces. Yeah. So you click on new repository secret. You say,
Hugging Face.
yeah, it's Hugging Face token. we can say super secret token, and then add that secret. Now it's there.
And you can say update right there.
We could update. Well, this doesn't update the code space, but we could update the token itself later if that changes.
Oh, I see. I see.
So we can go back to CodeSpaces, and your CodeSpaces secrets has changed. So yes, I want to reload. I want to reapply and get access to my secret. So these close interactions, these tight interaction between VS Code and CodeSpaces itself, like, oh, you changed this, you want to reload, because otherwise you wouldn't know, right?
So then maybe one last thing, if we have 1 minute or so, is maybe show the Copilot.
Yes, I actually don't have Copilot installed, but we can try that in a second. Let's see if let's see how the secrets can be accessed from here. So I think isn't it in Byron?
I always okay. Oh, there we go.
There you go. So you have your secret right there. So that's the secret that we added, the hugging face. Of course, if you have secrets, don't do this, because it's going to show up if you're doing a public
demo.
You know, like a demo like we're doing, that will show up your password. All right. So Copilot, I don't think I have it enabled for this, but I'm happy for you to walk me through how would I enable that.
So just go to the extensions real quick.
Oh, extensions.
Yep.
All right.
And just click on that, type in Copilot, and it installs in like a second. So yep, just click that, and then go back to the file menu, or that exactly.
Yeah, let's go to, say, for example, main.py.
So here's how I would use it: is you could say like comment exactly like, and just, I don't know, what were you thinking of doing with this application? Ask it to build a function that does something. There you go. Okay.
That's it. Well, perhaps I'm doing something wrong.
No. But say build a function that can you could do this. You could say build a logging decorator that I can use.
Ooh, there's like a melee interface. And then CodeSpaces.
I think I think it's better if it's specific to your code. So like
right.
If you said build a logging decorator, and then go down to the next tab down below, and then it should that, and then but tell it a little bit more. So build a logging decorator that logs input and into my output. There we go. And then go return, and then it should in a second do that. It's weird. Sometimes it looks like it's freaked out for a second.
Let's make something super simple. Build a hello world function.
Yeah. What you may want to do is make a new file real quick. It might be there's too many things going on.
Yeah,
and it wasn't involved at the beginning. Like it's like a child, so it needs to be. There you go. Now I would use it. So you could do build a hello world. Yeah. Function. I don't. It seems like yours is freaked out. Like it's not.
Maybe we need to.
Oh, there we go.
I don't want to disable it. It's enabled. Oh, I need a subscription.
Oh, you don't have a subscription.
That's right. Yeah, so you have to have some sort of a subscription here. But I mean, that's pretty useful.
Later, yeah. I mean, if we had more time, I would just share my screen. But
let's do a quick recap of everything that we did today, though. We grabbed a project. We did like regular software, Python software engineering actions. We went step by step. We had some problems, And then we identified what those problems were. TensorFlow was not installing. We needed Python 3.8. And then we had problems with the virtual environment. We changed virtual environments. I forgot to install Beautiful Soup 4. We made those changes, committed, pushed to the remote repository with CodeSpaces, and then we created a CodeSpace environment so that we could have Python 3.8, our dependencies already installed, and our tool available. We got into a little bit of trouble doing Python setup.py develop. In the end, we had to have special permissions to make that work. But essentially, what this does is that anyone in the world can click this repository and will have those problems gone, and they can start working on them right away.
Yeah, what I'm gonna do, because I'm gonna do like an hour live streaming later today on Hugging Face. I'll just fork your repository, and I'll use some of these ideas.
Yeah, that's great. Well, hopefully this was useful, and others can try out to configure CodeSpaces. Not only just use the remote compute, but actually configure it and make use of these special features.
Okay, I know you have to go, so we'll talk soon. Okay, talk to you later.